Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Sarah Pollack, and I'm the Director of Marketing for ForwardPMX, a global brand performance agency with headquarters in New York, London, and Hong Kong. As always, we hope that you, your teams, friends, and families are all staying safe and healthy during this time. Today, we have two fantastic speakers joining us, Tim Durgan, our Regional Strategy and Planning Director, and Yan Froud, our APAC Regional Vice President. You can look forward to some interesting learnings about what life looks like on the other side of the coronavirus, as we look to China's recovery for some guidance on how consumer behaviors are changing and how businesses can start to contextualize recovery in their markets. In many parts of the world, this continues to be an unpredictable situation, and so staying nimble, keeping close to your customer data, and having proactive plans in place that are ready to shift when the need arises is crucial. And we're certainly here to help support our clients and partners through this time. Today, we'll have about 45 minutes of content, and then we'll open it up for Q&A for any specific questions that you might have. If you have a question during the presentation, please use the chat feature, and we'll answer it at the end of the session or follow up with you directly if we run out of time. We'll also be sharing the discussion today on Twitter with the hashtags COVID-19 recovery and forward thinking. From here, I'll pass it off to Tim.
Thank you very, very much. And thank you everyone for your time today. Wherever you are in the world, we appreciate that it's a very difficult time globally, and we are completely with you as partners, and we hope that you and your family and your friends are all safe. A little bit about me and the team that we're presenting today. So my name is Tim. As some of you in the UK market may be able to tell, I am from the north of England. I've been based in Asia for around 4 years. I've previously worked in the Middle East, in Dubai, and Singapore and Hong Kong, and I've been with the business around 2 years, based in Hong Kong, working very closely with our team in China and all across Asia, so Japan, Korea, Russia, Singapore, Shanghai, and Hong Kong. I also have with me today Yan. So Yan has been in the business for a decade. She is originally from China, and she's been working in our London office for 10 years, spearheading the relationship between all of our brands in Asia with the rest of the business in North America and the UK as well. So Yan, I'll give you a couple of seconds to introduce yourself as well.
Hi everybody, thank you so much, Tim. So yes, as Tim mentioned earlier, I have been working in the company for decades, and then particularly working on industry like travel, luxury, retail. And it's very happy today to drive you through the presentation later on.
Brilliant, thank you. So just before we begin with all of our trends, so our position as an agency is that we find the change that fuels growth, and we do this in a number of ways. But we believe that our brands are really there to have a growth mindset, and we are there to go on that challenge with them. And this works its way through the business from top to bottom. So we work with two departments, and I'll go through those very shortly. But we are there to support and engage with our clients to find changes that can be as minuscule as changing a bid strategy in a search campaign, all the way through to large-scale changes across the organization and the business as a whole. But before we begin, I'd just like to make that note, as I mentioned earlier on. So we are a business that finds a change to fuel growth. But the COVID situation obviously makes this a difficult challenge for all of our partners, but we still see opportunities within this, and we still need to be trying to drive that mindset that we can still find changes where they happen, whether they be positive changes for certain industries and certain verticals, whether those be more practical changes to help mitigate the circumstances as they are. But our role is to support our clients, and we build ourselves and we build our pride on our relationships with our clients. Some of our clients in the business are 10 to 11 years old, and whether we are in a market or with a client for 6 months to 6 years or beyond, we treat every client the same. We are there as partners to show that calm, clear-minded strategy for anyone that we work with. And as I mentioned around finding change and fueling growth, that sits within two very, very key areas of our business. They are interlinked, and they are one large team by heart, but they are two distinct units. The consultancy team that I look after across Asia includes data science, MarTech, CRM, consumer insights, and strategy. We have a consultancy department in all of our key markets. We have a fantastic team out of the US. We have a huge team, strong team, and a growing team out of London. And we have a team in Hong Kong with elements all over Asia and all over those markets that I mentioned earlier on. On top of that, we have the activation team. So activation is really the core of what we do as a business, and it has been for a long time. That includes everything from paid media, organic, social, search, media planning and execution, and also anything to do with content production as well. And those two bits of the teams, those two departments are underpinned by Stage, which is our own first-party tech. And that's what the business has been built on for since our inception, actually. And that can be used in a lot of different ways, a lot of different folds. We're happy to talk to any of our clients around Stage and the capabilities of that at any time. But as we look into the markets, so going into where we see and what we've seen in China recently. So there is a cause and a reason for cautious optimism. So China has officially now come out of the coronavirus situation. Other markets are starting to do the same. But what we've seen is there are 5 key things that have changed since this time. One is changing needs. So the consumer and what they want is changing. New routes to market is extremely important. So as people have been at home for an extended period of time, brands have had to find new innovative ways to reach their consumers. Revenge spending is a trend that we've seen across a lot of different verticals. Supply management is absolutely crucial. So the global businesses that we work with have been hit in various different forms in terms of their supply chains, their ease to get stock into the hands of consumers. And there's also been a huge shift in new behaviors. So the way that people are interacting with media, the way that people are spending time on different devices. And that behavior we expect to continue, and we have seen continue as people are coming out and nations are coming out of the crisis. So a quick update on China. So you may know this already, but we just want to give you a brief summary of where China is. And we've also seen other nations as well come out of this. So New Zealand's had some fantastic news over the last week. Hong Kong is really starting to see development as well. So over the last, I think now 9 days, we've only had 2 days where there's been a single case, and those cases actually have been imported from people coming back from Europe. But if you take those cases out, then Hong Kong has had now, I think, 9 days of no cases, which is fantastic. And so although different markets are on this different curve with different implications, we are seeing in the markets that were hit first, we're seeing this change happening. So like I said, there's cause for a careful sense of optimism. So China is in recovery, and there are officially no new daily cases. And we're now starting to see that economic growth and the impact of how people are starting to change their behavior now that things are back to a new normal. So what are we seeing in the market? So 99% of businesses are now open again. Of this, 87% of hotels have now reopened. And as you can imagine, the hotel industry has been hit quite hard. It's one of the hardest hit industries. So to see that it's 87% and that's increasing every week to be open again is fantastic. Some hotels that we work with as partners we work with are now seeing that next weekend and the weekend after are full completely. Obviously that is not the entire industry, but it's really encouraging to see that certain hotels are starting to see that very quickly. The recovery of the metro is really important as well, because as you can imagine, social distancing and people being close to each other is really on the front of people's minds at the moment. So the metro is a 50% recovery, 90% recovery of property transactions. So the property space is recovering quite quickly. There's been a 135% month-on-month growth of restaurant transactions, which is fantastic. 70% growth in apparel spending year on year, and a 7 times growth in week-on-week salon transactions. So although that's quite a specific thing to look at, but again, it's very indicative of people now being comfortable to go out and be around other people. As a salon, as you can imagine, is a very hands-on experience. And then finally, there's a 2 times growth in e-commerce sales during the sales period year on year. So we expected something like this in terms of digital, but to see that spend and that appetite to spend to fuel the economy again is very encouraging. And as I mentioned around travel particularly, so as you can imagine, this is an industry that's really struggled during this time. But we've now started to see over last month and continuing into this month, that trend in room nights is really starting to increase. So as you can see on the left, there's been a huge slump, and some hotels have actually been around 7% capacity during that time. They're now starting to see that pick up. And the interesting thing about this is this not just a specific city. So this is not just driven by Shanghai and Beijing. All the major cities in China are starting to see that growth as well, and they're seeing the same trend, as you can see there on the right. One interesting thing that we have seen at the moment is that people are still a little bit apprehensive to travel from region to region. So if you are in one specific area of China, people are traveling within that area, there's still a little bit of trepidation around inter-travel, which is something that we expected. It's not a surprise, but that will start to grow over time. So to see these numbers as they are with that in mind is actually a very, very positive thing, and there's huge potential for this to rebound relatively quickly. Of course, we don't know what the long-term view of this will be, but these encouraging signs are still there to see. Next, Shenzhen Airport. So Shenzhen is very, very close to Hong Kong. It's in the south of China, and the airport, which is largely a domestic airport, they're back to 70% capacity, and that was 20% capacity at the end of February. So that's a very, very quick change, and it's a very positive change to see that air travel is starting to get back to where it needs to be. Again, international travel is still an unknown quantity at this stage, and it really does depend on governments, on obviously the individual circumstances of those nations. But air travel, to see this recovery and to see this consumer appetite to be back flying again, back traveling, back seeing the great outdoors, is a really positive step. And it's definitely something we expect to see across our other markets. But then when we look at this in the US, so this is all fantastic news, but this is all news that is happening in a recovery period. The interesting thing to note is the impact, excuse me, the impact of government behaviour during a challenge. So the stimulus package that was released a couple of weeks ago, that did see a short-term spike in revenue across a lot of different verticals. So we are seeing that people do want to spend, people do want to get out there where possible and engage with brands and spend their money. Obviously, as I just said, this is completely determined on individual responses of either states or governments or nations, but the appetite is there, and it's there all around the world in whatever market the people are in. From that as well, so this is what we've seen across a number of our clients as well, a number of clients in the industry. So we've seen that retail traffic as a response to the stimulus package has gone up by 18%, with conversions going up by 17%. Lead gen, which is, as you can imagine, is a difficult area at the moment, has also seen an increase, so 3% increase in traffic with a 9% increase in conversions. CPG has seen a 4% increase across both metrics. And the non-profit sector, which is obviously an area that people are refocusing towards during a time of need, that's gone up by 26% in terms of conversions. So there's really strong numbers here, and there's really strong behaviours that we've seen, not just in the US, but also in the UK, also in Asia. So the general trends are there, and we are seeing that whatever culture people are in, whatever nation people are in, people are generally exhibiting the same kinds of behaviours. But then to contextualize this, so as I mentioned, different markets are in different places, and they will have different lead times and different recovery periods. So the Economist recently, they mentioned there was four main scenarios they see happening, and obviously not all markets will respond in kind. The most optimistic scenario, which was given a 10% chance of happening, was that there is an improved government response. The trends that we've seen across the likes of New Zealand, Hong Kong, China will be seen globally, and then the year will end up with China growing by around 4%, which is still less than they did in the last 7 years, but globally an increase in 2%. The baseline scenario, which is seen to be the most probabilistic, is that the outbreak is under control by the end of March in China and by the end of June in Europe and the US. Tourism struggling all year, as you can imagine. China staying completely stable and flat. The US and the globe generally in recession, but then 2021 being that year of growth. Looking at the numbers and the data right now, China was under control by the end of March. So if that follows suit with this, then the end of June, this does seem the most likely, even now when we're a bit further on in this time. That was given a 50% chance of happening. Pessimistic view, which has been given a 30% chance of happening, was that this virus becomes endemic. The vaccine's not until next year. Nationalist sentiment rises, which we have seen a little bit of, but not as strong as this view. China growth is actually negative, global US is negative, and the rebound takes 2 years. And then the very kind of pessimistic, the pandemic view is that a transmission is worldwide, poor policies, and 1.3% of the national populations die. That's again given a 10% view. So we're working quite confidently towards the baseline with maybe a view into pessimistic right now. But the key about this as well is it's not just scenarios of global handling of different situations, but it's different verticals and different industries are having a very, very different experience, and they have a different level of exposure to something like this. So something like technology, media, manufacturing, beverages, food, things like this have got a medium or a low exposure. Obviously, you can imagine things like defense contracts and government contracts are relatively unaffected, but things that are really, really struggling, things like gaming, gambling, casinos, and Macau, which is very, very close to Hong Kong, has been shut down for over a month. So as you can imagine, the casino industry has been very, very drastically hit, as I'm sure is the same in likes of Vegas. Things like retail, aviation, travel, all those luxury goods that are not necessarily a necessity are very, very exposed to this. And these are the areas that we're focusing on today, because these are the areas where you'll see these trends in sharp focus as we continue. But then we look at this through the US lens as well. So we are seeing that different industries, as I've just mentioned, are seeing differences in the impact. So home improvement and furnishings, as you can imagine, are seeing a trend upwards as people are spending more time in the house. They're looking around their four walls and trying to make their home furnishings much more improved. So we've seen spend has increased, orders have increased, traffic has increased. Apparel has seen obviously a hit. The interesting thing for that is that we've actually seen a couple of these metrics go up in terms of traffic and orders, but people are spending significantly less. That's happened both last week and also within this week as well. So this is an area that needs to be adapting very quickly, and the trends that we're going to talk about later on are really quite key for a market like this and a vertical like this. Non-profit, as I mentioned, is seeing a growth. So as people are becoming more aware of others around them and those more in need, we are seeing an interest towards this, which is good to see from a social and a personal level, that people are still engaging and still giving in times of need. So we're hoping to see that continue as life goes on and things develop. Then things like footwear, bags, accessories. Funnily enough and interestingly enough, the American consumers that we're seeing are spending much more on these things. So an element of retail therapy is involved in this. But we are expecting to see this area grow more and more in terms of e-commerce. So people may not be able to go into their local foot store and try on some shoes, but they are driving themselves onto an e-commerce platform much quicker. And we're seeing a lot of these things that may have taken 2 or 3 years to get to a certain point in consumption. That's now happened within 2 or 3 weeks. And footwear, bags, accessories are a good example of that. But then we're also seeing challenges elsewhere. So CPG obviously is struggling in terms of the orders. Not a huge amount in terms of last year to this year that we've seen in other industries. But then, as you can see at the top there, that retail catalog is really going through a challenging time at the moment. And lead generation, as you can imagine, is an area that needs to ride out this storm quite significantly. But as I mentioned, we are seeing positives in other markets, and this is much a case of working with these trends that we see, making the right choices at the right times, and then getting a better understanding of your consumers, so when that rebound does eventually and inevitably hit, that these brands that are working in this lead gen space can win that rebound. And the key really is to respond and do not dictate. So as any brand in any situation and any circumstance, responding to your consumers is absolutely critical. And the last 2 or 3 months has put that into a very, very clear focus, that brands and marketers that listen to their consumers without speaking at them, those are the brands that have been embracing change for the last 50 years. And those are the brands that have been seeing market share improve for the last 50 years. And what we're seeing now, and the trends that Yanyan's going to run through very, very quickly, is that these brands that hit a situation like this, if they are staying true to their goals of being consumer-centric and consumer-first, those brands are being able to ride out this storm, whereas brands that are falling behind in a digital space and in the communication space are struggling more than their counterparts. And then this is where we talk about this new normal. So this new normal has become a very popular phrase over the last few months. But for us, it doesn't necessarily mean a new way that everyone's going to do things, which obviously that's important, but it's around driving action from this change. So we are completely in the business of partnering with our clients and with our key stakeholders to drive action from change, not just reporting on what that change is and all living in this new space, but it's around, again, finding the change that fuels growth. And that means action. And the new normal takes 3 phases. One is changing behaviors. And as you've all seen, people's behaviors have changed quite significantly. Number 2 is driving those real-time insights. And Yanyan will talk about that in a second. And then, as I've just mentioned, is being agile and having agility and adaptability to the core of the business. So I'll hand over to Yanyan now to talk about what we can learn from China's road to recovery.
Thank you very much, Tim. So as Tim mentioned earlier, there are 5 major points. So there is the changing needs to consumer, there is a new route to markets, and there is a trend revenge spending, supply management, and there is a new behavior. So first of all, it is important for us all realize there is a fast evolving consumer needs. Now people behavior are forced to change now. So what we need in December is not what we need right now. A lot of trends will be continue, and even the situation will back to normal. It's important that consumers are rethinking their priorities. So 80% of the people would pay attention to eating healthily. 64% of people agree to or strongly agree that they will consider products that are more environmentally friendly, and also 66% saying that they want to ensure product safety after the crisis. And that's very important that we act to that change. So throughout the outbreak period, people were extremely concerned food delivery will be dangerous. So facing this concern, the market lead in China, Meituan, they act quickly with no contact delivery. That will, so basically the delivery man will wait with distance until the food is picked up. During this whole process, there's no physical contact between the delivery man and the consumer. So this fast adoption to the environment really paid off. The delivery business increased massively, and then this contactless delivery has been also adopted in many countries to keep their business going or even drive more revenue than before. So the consumer they build trust with will keep that trust for a long time. And there is a huge potential that businesses can build long-term value with the consumers as well. So there are 4 key growth actions here. Right. So the first adoption, firstly, be aware of the change of your consumer behavior. You want to re-elevate your consumer needs and your ability to meet them. Secondly, agile mindset is extremely crucial during this period. So you need to identify opportunities in your sector, and you want to get ahead of this first move advantage. And remember, this is the lifetime opportunity for you to gain market share. Thirdly, as we keep saying, data is always super important. We need to make sure that we have the right measurement of data framework, because your consumer may look very different to what it used to be and acts very differently too. So the more you know about your consumer, the quickly you can react, and that will help you to recover quicker. Last but not the least, we also need to be conscious how we communicate with our consumers. So knowing the consumers are more worrying about health and the environment, and then their contribution to the environment as well. So we need to be aware of that and figure out how we can use our brand to deliver the right message facing this type of trends. The message should not just for the moment, but also for the future. So the second trend we're going to talk about today is new route to market. As consumer have to stay indoor, and brand have to shorten the time between product and the consumer. So the brand in China has been thinking of a faster route to connect with consumers. And a lot of time this means technology and innovation. There have been some great examples, starting from live streaming indoor workout sessions by Nike, museum to view on social media. For example, Forbidden City in Beijing was forced to close during the outbreak, but they did an online tour and attracted more than 34 million users or viewers within 2 hours. And there are more examples like skincare. They put their professional staff to speak to consumers individually via social media rather than physical stores. Starbucks installed a coffee vending machine to avoid human contact concern, and also live streaming DJ show is very popular during that time. So just to summarize, what we can learn from the second trend is that replace distribution with online stream routes, and also reduce cost by capitalizing on the online base. And you want to tailor your messaging to ensure the right engagement, and you want to expand coverage and supply through digital channels. Also, you want to gain visibility into real-time inventory and sales data. You want to use that data to link to your online media to improve point of sales and also channel relationships. Lastly, you need to make sure you collect all the data and utilize them, not just for today, but for future too. And now is the real time. It is the right time that you can collect the data the best, because a lot of the actions really happening online right now. So the third point I want to talk about is the supply chains. So everyone needs a supply chains, and many has been impacted by the outbreak in different regions and different nations in a different degrees. So for those areas who are still in lockdowns, the suppliers that China or Italy provided have been greatly impacted. And today, they are still in a recovery phase. So people's behavior, media, and supplies, they all actually linking very tightly together, and then that cannot be ignored. So as you can see from this slide, so 80% of plants in China has actually restarted, and 60% of truck staff back on road to deliver goods. Having said that, the international transport is still up in the air, and that is still depends on the local government and their policies. But now we are going to see that the delivery demand is going to spike. And this is quite uncertain that how businesses to manage this supplier and the demand relationship. And the most importantly, how that be managed via media. So the dependency on quarantine areas, the world's largest 1,000 companies or their suppliers impacted, and that is including from several different industries. So when we are pushing new products and new stocks to our consumers, for example, we saw Amazon and some of other retailers are getting a huge demand during the outbreak, and that is not much a problem due to the demand, but the big problem is how to supply that demand. When we are linking media with that supply, it is very important that firstly, we have the right data in place to help forecast. Second, is to understand how to drive the right product into your media channel. And number three is to make sure you have the technology available linking to media so that you don't pay media on the product you can't deliver. Fully utilize, for example, Google Shopping feed, Facebook feed, or similar, linking to your stock with the media would be a necessary thing to cover. So that is the problem business will have in the next few months, that you need to ensure to bring the front chain, your supplier, and your media all together to ensure you are pushing the right product to the right people at the right time. This should always be the recommendation to all businesses, but it is more important than ever as you have very little control now. So another thing that is that you want to invest into the local supplier chains. And if you are a global structure, so having that set up, you would be able to supply to your consumers very quickly, and it would be dangerous to have just one single supply chain anyway. And there should always be a backup plan or options. So another reason this supply is more crucial than ever is also because of the upcoming revenge spending, which already happening in certain areas and in certain industry. We are seeing that people have already been spending a lot of money on home fitness due to the lockdown, but we also seeing people are out of that phrase and being back to the society. Beauty or fashion brands are in particular, many brands seeing double-digit growth recently in the same period compared to last year. So we also see this offline as well. For example, a luxury brand opened their new stores in China and achieved 2.7 million US dollars in just one single day. People are willing to spend, and they are more keen to get what they wanted to have, but they haven't been with us for a number of weeks. We also see this act are different throughout different regions. So whereas, for example, here, if you can just roll out all the components here. So whereas house, as you can expect, will be highly focused across all the regions. But we do see differences from China compared to many other key regions in Europe or US on the priorities, as you can see here. US is very much more concerned about savings to ensure that they are secure if this similar crisis happen again, where the vitamin is much lower down to their list, but higher up for China. The reason the saving is lower down to the list to the Chinese consumers is because they are already living in the culture of 7 bullets. What that means is that there's always somebody within the family who can support you during any crisis, which is nice. As said earlier, each market can be very different on the behavior. So what you are prioritizing in one market may not gonna work in another. So will the revenge spending save brands? The offline stores will see that surge, and that people finally allowed it to be outside, and they will make the most of it as well as they can. The offline stores will likely to see a bit of boom. Online will also see similar trend, especially those purchases toward like makeups and outdoor wears, or being price competitive compared to offline. But keep in mind, revenge spending is not going to be sustained. The trend we are seeing will last a week or 10 days, depends on the market and the industry. And most importantly, that revenge spend will not recover the initial loss. So the growth action here is to match product priority to the demand spike. Managing your digital media spend to ensure you are capturing that demand, even that demand is a short time of period, 7 to 10 days or slightly longer. Ensure you are ready to be there to cover the right search term, for example, on the right consumer, and this will make your recovery easier. Having that variety in your product portfolio is also very important. As we talked a lot about consumer needs, you need to adopt those changes. Businesses have a wider portfolio, can adopt that much quicker. And also invest into your personalization across all platforms. As we keep saying, the right messages to the right people at the right time is going to become much more important. That's because there's going to be a huge competition in the coming weeks or months, and you want to be ready to win the rebound. And if a brand is not ready during the rebound period, it will struggle and leave behind. And remember what I said earlier, that this is one of your lifetime to win market share. So that's how important this is. And as long as a long-term basis, there will be a general adoption around technology as well. Moving to the next slide. So the rise in digital consumptions is always happening. So what happened in the past weeks, the future has been brought into the present. Something that we are expecting to happen in 5 to 10 years time, now certainly pushed to happen within 12 weeks. Previously, we see an average Chinese digital consumer spend 6.1 hours a day online, now spending 7.2 hours, which is 20% increase. And this is particularly impacted due to the quarantine indoor, and we will see how that impacted to the economy and on a different industries. So when we actually looking at the coronavirus to SARS, which happened 20 years ago in 2003, nearly 20 years ago, SARS developed the e-commerce massively. And this coronavirus may lead us to a new online business model. So when we see the digital consumptions is actually spreading across a lot of different platforms, it is not just the social media, Weibo, WeChat, or Facebook, but also short video platforms like live streaming. I'm sure you have been seeing similar things in Europe and US regions. The live streaming is so popular everywhere across the digital media nowadays. So as you can see here, it stands out in the Western markets. The social media streaming is really increasing. So another interesting area on this whole topic is the rise of a silver surfer. The older generation has been forced to use digital more than ever, and we see the share of e-commerce used by age over 50s jumped from 11 to 14% year-on-year. So this consumer group is becoming more digital aware and learning new digital skills. They're not quite happy to do so, but they're forced to do so. If you make the process easier, the brands will win. They will not want to spend a lot of time figure out from 10 different websites, but only choose the easy ones. Brands are also capitalizing on this new digital behavior. There are many more live streaming than ever before. For example, Ctrip, a OTA, who should be very impacted by this crisis, jumped up to the live streaming on to sell hotels. Taobao saw a huge user spike in their live streaming sessions, as they see the session are doubled during February, which was the outbreak peak in China. And also Louis Vuitton, the first luxury brand to host a live stream on platforms to showcase their summer collections. And the Shanghai Fashion Week went completely online during the entire Fashion Week across different live streaming platforms, so that they are still engaging with the consumers, even they can't physically contact. So there's no excuse that you're just giving up. There's so many different ways that you can communicate with the consumers. We also see JD, as you can see here is a little robot. We see JD.com has been using delivery robots to deliver goods, and this is a very interesting trend, as Amazon in the US already been using similar thing for 2 years now. These trends are not completely new, but these trends are probably, let's say, 1% of their users in the past, but now jumped its popularity massively. We expect this to continue after this crisis. So another trend we see, the Alibaba in Wuhan, while there were lockdown, opened unstaffed supermarkets and also around hospital. So they received more than 200 customers in just their first day. This is very, very popular, and people start to adopt new things and willing to try new things. So how can we capitalize on that? What is our growth actions? It's very simple. It's just innovate. So innovate across digital ecosystem, explore new brand engagement opportunities such as live streaming or anything that's used to have on your media plan as a nice thing to have before, but become more and more important today. Also, including live streaming opportunities into your influencer marketing, looking into how to develop this area and start to understand how they can help you to bring your brand to more people in the new way. So re-elevating the role of your e-commerce as the last point in your business is also important. Many brands today, they have a e-commerce, but still there are a large number of brands. Either they don't have the capability to drive the right level or the right focus to e-commerce, or some of the brands are completely offline still for different reasons. Now e-commerce is more important than ever was. So I'm gonna pass back to Team Duggan to summarize all the points, trends, and recommended actions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Yan. So a lot in there, as you can imagine. But the key thing for this is these aren't independent trends. So you have changing needs of the consumer, new routes to market, revenge spending, supply management, and these new behaviors in terms of digital adoption. But when you put those all together, you can imagine that if your consumers are going to see this big revenge spending, but their needs have changed and they're more online, then if you find that new route to market, but you have supply issues, then those 5 things, those 5 trends are all intrinsically linked to each other. So it's important as an agency for us to consult our clients properly, and it's important for all of our partners to see that big picture and to understand the relationship between these 5 trends. Like I said earlier on, the brands that have done this and the brands that have seen that link between all those different aspects and have acted quickly, those are the brands that have won in the past and will win in the future. So our closing thoughts before we field a couple of questions. Excuse me. So number one, although there is caution and care that obviously has to remain, particularly when markets are still at the peak of this situation, there is optimism for tomorrow. There are countries that are seeing the end of this. There are nations like New Zealand, China, Hong Kong, etc., that are coming out of this. So although individual markets and individual listeners on this call may be in different stages of this pandemic, there is optimism for tomorrow. The key thing to remember, and as we've gone through with these 5 trends, is that your consumer in December isn't the same as your consumer now. What they think, what they do, how they feel about your brand, potentially, how they feel about the products they buy, is going to be completely different. So you need to reevaluate your consumer, and you need to reevaluate your position within their life and your relevancy within their life now. And you really need to go on a new journey with them. That's a journey of messaging. It's a journey of maybe potentially trust, if depending on the industry that you're in. And it's a journey on meeting them where they are at now. And they may be on live streaming platforms. They may be on more digital platforms. They may be more of an e-commerce customer than they were before. So you need to go on that journey with them. And you also kind of need to start from scratch in some respects, because if you make the assumptions that they're the same, then you will be you'll fall short of your targets. And that needs to happen in terms of data. So if you have a static CRM list, and that list may be 6 months old, that list, like I just said, might not be as relevant as you think it may be. So ensuring that your data structure is up to scratch and is suitable for this new normal is absolutely key. You need to be having a real-time view of your consumers. You need to be following that data wherever it goes. And if you've got 5, 6, 10 different data sources, whether that's a property management system, or whether that's a CDP or a DMP or data within your Google ecosystem, if those pieces of data aren't talking to each other, then you will not be able to rebound as quickly as you potentially could if you had that data talking to each other. So your data structure, your internal management systems, your internal, even your organizational structure of your teams needs to be evaluated, and more often than not needs to be updated. But the good news is, if there is any good news to be had during this time, is that it's never too late to take advantage. It's never too late to capitalize on what's going to be ahead, especially when you have markets that are giving you direction like this. So preparing today is going to give you a better chance of success tomorrow. So it's not, the boat hasn't sailed for most markets. And like we said, knowing what's happened elsewhere allows you to take advantage of what may happen or what's likely to happen in your own markets. So thank you very, very much for your time. We will take a couple of questions now that the guys in the US lead. We are very, very happy to follow up and do a deep dive on specific industries. We have additional versions and more tailored versions of documents like this for our core clients across all of our regions. And we have also taken first-party data from some of our travel clients to look at things like SARS and rebound periods and things like that. So we have a very, very, very strong data science team all the way around the world. We are very happy to engage with you to really deep dive into your specific sectors, your specific industries. So please reach out if you would like more information. But I'll hand over to the guys in the US to then field those questions. Thank you very much again for your time.
Thank you so much, Tim and Yan. That was great. And to echo Tim's point, we will absolutely be in touch after this session, and you can absolutely feel free to continue the conversation with us there. We'll be sending everyone the presentation as well as the recording of this session. So we did have a couple of questions come in, the first from Christina, and she asked, are there any trends on what consumers expect from the new normal in-store experience?
Yes, in short. Again, it really does depend on your vertical, but that way of efficiency. So one of the things that we had in the slide around the JD delivery, although that is a point around a specific piece of delivery, the prediction that we have in there is around service. So as people in stores, I can see that there's going to be more of a trend towards the immediacy, and that's already, like we said, there's nothing in here that wasn't already going to happen, but it was more likely to happen in 2025, 2028. I think that immediacy and that range is going to be quite important. We have seen in a few places, I think in the UK as well, where supermarkets have shut down certain portions of their supermarket for very different reasons. But I think the in-store experience will be around more knowledge, more trust, more knowledge of their product, more knowledge of that consumer, and also that immediacy. So if there is a product that is out of stock right now, let's say you're in an electrical store, the customers and the brands that will win will be able to turn something around very quickly and get something to your door and in your hand in a new way. And also, I think there will be a trend towards your store experience and your adoption of digital in stores. One of the best examples I can think of off the top of my head is something like an Apple store, and they do that already really, really well. But I would expect that your local supermarkets or your more traditional non-tech, in invert commas, businesses, there will be an expectation for a digital adoption in store, where if you go in, maybe you sign in on a screen somewhere in store, and they've got your details and they can tailor your shopping experience. Things like that, I think, maybe not very quickly, but I think over time will probably start to happen. And there is precedent for that elsewhere, even before the coronavirus. There's a really, really good example of in Japan, where they had an ad on the side of the tube, basically the metro system in Tokyo. You could go on there. It's basically like a shop front, essentially. So you could pick your items and you could put them in your basket. You'd sign in, pay with your Oyster card or a credit card or your phone in the metro station for your food, and then by the time you got home, that food was delivered to your house. And that's just a really, 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 really good example of digital and offline merging together. And I think that trend is more likely to be accelerated off the back of this, because of people's desire to stay home, because of whether it's a not touching things situation as well. I think all those factors together will drive digital adoption and data adoption in an offline capacity as well.
Great, thank you. I think we have time for one more. So the other question we got, do you have any sort of estimates for recovery time for international travel?
Yeah, we have been looking at more of a deep dive into data. It's very, very dependent on governments, to be honest. I think international travel is a very broad term, because obviously so many nations that you could go to. But where we did a deep dive for a travel client of ours based in Asia around SARS and around the impact of that, just to estimate the recovery periods and the room fill rates over time. We actually took their first party data from that period and from this period together and overlaid those two. But I think the estimates really now are depending on how governments handle that curve. I would probably go out on a limb and say that Britain will be further behind the rest of Europe. But we have looked at first party and market data to estimate a time period between borders opening and a kind of an all clear and then hotel travel together. And like I said, that's with our data science team, it's done a lot of crunching for that. So we can, like I said, we can go into deep dives for industries. We've kept these trends relatively broad because of the nature of these kind of webinars, but we can absolutely take your data, we can absolutely take your market, industry, and first-party data to then start making more data-driven estimates for your businesses as well. So, like I said, very, very happy to engage and have further conversations with you around that.
Excellent. Thank you, Tim. We are just about out of time. So if we did not get to your questions, we'll follow up with you directly after. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll make the materials from today available to you all. Thank you so much for joining us. Take care, everyone.